Hello YouTube and welcome to my final video on UFO 50. Today we're going to be getting into some heavy spoilers, so I just want to right off the bat say, if you are trying to hide some of the mystery of this game, if you don't want to see everything this game has to offer and want to figure some stuff out on your own, this is not the video for you. I'm giving you an opportunity right now to close your browser. We are going to talk today about the terminal in UFO 50 because I find it to be one of the most interesting things about this game. It's a really cool thing that they added. You know, this isn't just a collection of 50 games, it's a history of a company. And there's some really cool stuff hidden in the terminal. To give you an idea of what's going to be covered in this video, in case you want to decide, if you want to watch it or not, I'm going to go over the basics of the terminal, kind of the basics of like how to use it and some of the language that it uses to work. We're going to go through some of the hidden ARG stuff in this game, some of the hidden storyline behind the entire game, and then I'm just going to kind of go right through and go through all the terminal codes that have been discovered. I think a lot of these were data mined from the game, but I kind of went through and took a try at all of them, and I'm going to kind of rapid fire run you through all the different codes and how they work in the game. But yeah, this is going to be what this video is about. It might be a little bit longer. It's a bit of an edited video. But yeah, if you want to see everything this game has offered, stick around, watch it with me. Otherwise, come back after you've played the game a bunch, or once you've given up. If you haven't found all this stuff on your own, I think it's worth looking at. If you're trying to figure out where to get started with the terminal, maybe it's worth watching a little bit of this video early on. But we'll kind of get into it and see how things look. To give you a bit of an intro course on the terminal, we've got a basic input here that's got 8 letters. You can put in letters, numbers, and it uses a kind of interesting system to figure out. I don't know where exactly the origin of all of this is in the game. I don't know if it tells you this stuff somewhere. But if you're playing around with it, you quickly realize that the dash in the middle is kind of a code that breaks up a lot of the codes. For the basics of the game, there's different things like help, list, info, desk, hist, exec, copy, name, move, edit. You'll kind of see in the footage here that I have that you can figure out that you use one of these 4-letter intros and then you put a number on the end, 0001, and that's going to show you the first game, Barbuda, and then every time you put up that number, 0002, etc., you'll find all the different games. And this has like different code names for how the developers had listed the games during development. And you can kind of play around with this, and if you've ever used like DOS, it's kind of similar to that, where once you know the basic commands, you can kind of play around with it and figure out, oh, I can do this, I can do that. There are some interesting things in here like copying, naming, moving, editing files, which the game won't let you do, but it's interesting to see that they have that kind of stuff in there as maybe like tools that the development team had used when they were working on this game. But yeah, playing around with the terminal, if you don't want to really see everything spoiled, but you want to kind of get a start on things, that's a great start. I'm also going to point you towards one thing. This is kind of where the ARG all starts in the game. But if you look on the description for Night Manor, you'll see a code hidden in the description, which points at a code Greg-Milk, who is one of the different developers that has worked with UFO Soft over the course of the years. And we'll learn more about him as the ARG goes on, but that's kind of my starting hint. If you just were figuring out where to start with the ARG and you want to kind of figure it out yourself, Greg-Milk is kind of the code that'll kickstart it all. But we'll kind of go now through like all the different things with the ARG. Once you type in Greg Milk on the code, the terminal will bring up an odd-looking binary map. You see a lot of zeros and ones. This is kind of an overlay for the screen itself for picking your game. And you'll notice that the bottom row has a single 1 on it, which is actually pointing you to the game Mini and Max. That's giving you a hint of, oh, something's odd's going on with this game. And this is where I think a lot of people probably won't figure out where to go unless you're really trying to explore with it. If you go into the game Mini and Max, there's one odd room towards the bottom of the map that doesn't seem to have a purpose. The only thing that's on top of it is an odd symbol over like a doorway, and that's the same symbol that in the menu the terminal has. So that's kind of giving you a hint of, oh, we're looking for something with the terminal. And then we kind of figure out the language of how the terminal works, where if you open up the terminal while you're standing in this room, you will find a hidden message. And these hidden messages are kind of displayed all throughout UFO 50. You might be like, well, how do I know when to open the terminal? Well, this is your starting point, and this is the treasure hunt. So you'll see here that the first clue it gives us is 50 games for you to search through. What a hunt I have for you. I offer up this starting clue. Turn your skin a shade of blue. Dr. Seuss would love this, you know, it's a nice little rhyming thing, very basic. But really what the whole treasure hunt's about is figuring out what game they're talking about and figuring out what you have to do to trigger the next terminal. So this first one is a hint towards the game Camouflage, which is like the puzzle game with the chameleon. And they're telling you, oh, if you turn the chameleon blue and then open up the terminal, it gives us our next hint in the ARG. And it's going to kind of just keep going like this, so we're going to kind of rapid fire through it because this is a pretty long series of stuff. But this is the same basic thing all along the way. From there, it goes loud enough to wake the neighborhood cat, which is pointing us to the game Party House, which you kind of have to get guests in until you have the cat yelling when there's two troublemakers in there. And once the cat's yelling, if you open up the terminal again, we get our third hint, which is an adventure begins when a sandwich is stolen. This one I thought was pretty easy to figure out. If you go to the game Ninpeck and you go right to the intro cutscene for it, you'll see there's a moment where the sandwich is stolen. If you pause the game right then and go into the terminal, you then get into another clue, which is third stinger waits in the hangar. That's pointing us to Star Wasper, which is the shooter game that has 3 different ships. If you go to that selection screen and you have the third ship selected, that'll then open up the terminal, which gives us another clue, which points us to a column of 3 need never flee. This one's a little bit harder, I think, to figure out. This one points to the game Tactics, which is just having us make a vertical line of 3 units on the battlefield. Pretty simple, but you wouldn't really know to look at the terminal while you're doing this, so I don't think people would really accidentally find this one. A lot of these actually are fairly simple, fairly easy to do. Only a couple of them are a little bit more challenging. But this one gives us the clue, a purple moon shines on a lonely night, which is taking us back to the first game, Barbuda, which if we just move one screen from the start, it's going to go into a screen that has a purple moon shining in the sky. Anywhere on the screen, we can go into the terminal. So this code is giving us EXEC-MIAS. Now, if you were really paying attention and you were playing around with those terminal codes I told you about earlier, you probably could find this on your own. You might not necessarily need to do this first chunk of the ARG. It's kind of an alternate way of doing it. Because once you know the basic language of how the terminal works, you could find the list of games inside UFO 50, find the shortcut for this game, and then execute it from the terminal to run it in. But this is telling us exactly where to go to find that first step, and that's going to bring us in to a brand new game called Miasma Tower, I think it's pronounced. I'm not actually sure. But this is our first hidden game inside of UFO 50, a 51st game. And it is uncovering a whole new plot within UFO 50. Miasma Tower is an interesting game inside. It's not really a conventional kind of game. It's more of an exploration/adventure kind of game. The point of these game segments, and we're going to see a few of them as we go through this metagame, is I'm not going to walk you through it all, but I'm going to kind of show you the end results, because I definitely would say if you're interested in the lore of UFO 50 as a company and the work culture and all that stuff, where I think the most interesting storytelling comes in this collection, play it all for yourself, because there's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of different little bits, tidbits, things like that you could miss. There's probably things I missed even. And I would not be surprised as we talk about this more if there's complete things that I don't know that are in here. It seems like the kind of secrets that more things could be hidden. But again, that's something I probably will talk about a little bit later in this video. But for now, you work through this whole segment, and eventually we find a disc. And the disc gets put into the computer, the power gets turned on, and we find our first prototype game. Which it gives us another code for it, EXEC-COLO, which gives us an alternate version of the game, Paint Chase. With this version, we can no longer run over enemies. The goal is to just paint the entire level. It's a bit different of a gameplay. It's very challenging, actually. But once you clear that, which this is how this whole thing's going to work, is we're going to find different segments of this hidden game, and we clear a prototype, and once we clear all the prototypes, we can finish the game. It's kind of a 51st game that's given to us in different chunks as we progress through this metagame. But we'll put in that code, the EXEC/COLO. We finish the minigame, and that gives us another hint, which this time it's pointing us to In the Presence of Seabird Royalty, which is showing us the game Waldorf's Journey. On this one, we just have to talk to the shopkeeper, the bird that has the crown on, and then we can open up the terminal. Gives us another hint, which is a tank travels on teeth. This one's pointing us towards Warp Tank. And here we just need to find teeth somewhere in the game. We have to sit on them and open the terminal. This is probably one of the ones that will take a little bit longer. It's a little bit harder to do. But you don't have to, if you just want to see the chunks, you could just use the codes. You don't have to run through this whole ARG. I just wanted to show it off because I feel like a lot of people are kind of ignoring the steps to get to the end game. But here it'll give us the hint. Overtime kicks the referee into action, which is pointing us to Kick Club. I actually didn't know until I read this that there is a referee in Kick Club. If the timer runs out, which has never happened to me before, a referee shows up on screen. It's kind of like the Spelunky ghost. It chases you around. If it touches you, you die. But once this referee's on the screen, if you open up the terminal, that'll give us another code. The bridge demon will send you to the spirit world. This one's pointing to Rakshasha, which is just if you are hit by the first boss, the demon on like the large bridge, if you're knocked out by him, then you can open the terminal there, which will give us another code. Eyes roll in the skeleton caves. This one's a little bit harder to figure out, I think, but this one's pointing to Mooncat. We just have to get to an area that has skeletons in the background and the eyeballs rolling around. That is a little bit deeper into the game, so this one's a little bit harder to find. But once we get there, you go into the terminal, and there you'll get the last clue before our next section of the side game, when words are stated but untranslated. This one's pointing to Planet Zoldath. We just have to talk to an alien that doesn't speak English, and once that happens, you can hit the terminal button, and you'll find our next code, which is hide-hole. And that's going to bring us back to the metagame world. Now we find ourselves in another segment of Miasma Tower. This one, we're finally getting out of the basement, essentially, and we are going to be able to talk to different employees. It's our first time seeing other people that work at UFO Soft, kind of seeing what they're working on, what's going on. It gives us our first glimpse at the office building. There's a little bit of a story here, too, where you got to go through, you talk to certain people, you'll find, like, prototypes of games, things like that. And what we're looking for here, though, is there's a little bit of problem solving where we need to get, I believe it's the person that's assembling the the LX1 machines. Eventually, we get far enough that they give us a key into the cabinet, which lets us find another prototype. This time, it's going to be a prototype for Campanella, which is just a real basic entry level for Campanella. It's a one-screen, just quick and easy playthrough. Simpler graphics. It's just one room. It's also I think it's not too difficult, but it is a bit harder than Campanella itself. And once you get through this simple level, it's going to send us back into the real world, where we're going to go back to the other metagame. The key that it gives us here is out of the mouths of cave children. This is going to point at Rock-On Island, which we just have to go to the training level. There's a baby at the bottom of the screen. If you talk to the baby, go into the terminal. That brings us to the next step of when the wolf faces the angel. This one I think is really hard to figure out, but this one's pointing at Hyper Contender. And you have to trigger like a versus match between Sephi and Rek. So if you do that and you get a versus screen up, the easiest way to do this is going into two-player mode, but I guess it just depends if you have access to two controllers or not. Otherwise, you could play through the single-player game with either of them, and once you get to that versus screen, open up the terminal, and that'll point us to a toad and a cannon side-by-side. This is Devilition. You just have to place both of those, a toad and a cannon, next to each other. Open up the terminal again, and this will be a head in your hands during the mayor's race. This one's pointing us at Fist Hell. So what you need to be doing is holding a zombie head and then open up the terminal, which will take us to a crescent of sand surrounds a hole. This one's in Golferia, the adventure golf game. There is a spot on the map that's a little bit to the left side of the screen after you start, which gives us like it's in the sand, there's like a crescent shape. And if your ball is placed anywhere in that crescent shape, open up the terminal, it'll give us the record, the message. She rates the space station 3 out of 5 stars. This one's pointing at Campanella 2. I also think this one's kind of hard to figure out because whenever I hear Space Station, I'm thinking of Vanger, other games. But once you're in Campanella 2, if you just get your rating to be 3 stars in the top left corner, that just means picking up a few stars. That'll get us our next big hidden metagame, which is Soap Stop. And this is the point in the metagame where things get very large. This third segment of Miasma Tower is by far the longest. There's a lot of lore here. If you're interested in the lore, definitely talk to everyone multiple times. Try to see everything that people are talking about. It's also great to go back to old areas and take a look at them to see if anyone new showing up or any strange new Easter eggs are happening. Because there's lots of creative Easter eggs. There's lots of stories with the different employees. And this is really where we start finding out, that maybe UFO 50 isn't necessarily like a real place of happiness. Like, it's a regular workplace, right? Yeah, you have definitely cool things that are being made, but you also have things like toxic cultures, stuff like that. There's even some strange different like subplots and stuff that nothing's really told to you specifically, but there's a lot of things you can infer from stuff going on in this office. But this one's a pretty lengthy section of where you're kind of just running errands for different employees. And eventually, you got to get to the manager's office, talk to the manager, which I always find it interesting here. All of the managers seem to be depicted like as large creatures or bugs. They're always drawn differently, and it kind of gives the impression that maybe Gregory Milk, who made this whole Miasma Tower game, didn't really care for the people around. There's also like a plot line of like a buyout. UFO 50, it seems like, has merged with someone else, or someone else bought it out. Some of the original people are leaving, and there's definitely a lot of I guess distrust, things like that. And maybe you find out here that Greg Milk might not necessarily be happy working on this UFO 50 collection. He obviously is interested in preservation because he's hiding games in, and he's explaining, here, this is what it was really like to work. If you're digging deep enough, this is what UFO 50 was all about. But definitely, there's a lot going on here, and I think you can interpret it a lot of ways. This is definitely the one. If you're going to play any of these for yourself, this is the one to check out. But once you get through it all, we do end up with our final prototype game that we're going to find, which this one's a completely new game. So we're actually getting a 50-second game, if you can call it that. It's obviously a very early prototype, but this one's called, I think it's called God's Blood, I believe. I'm kind of doing this commentary after I recorded everything, so I'm not looking at the footage right now, but I'm pretty sure it's called God's Blood. It's like a 2D combat game, but it's kind of turn-based for the most part. It's on, like, everything's on a timer. It seems like a very simple game, but it also seems very early in production, so there's not really too much to do in it. This one should be pretty easy to clear, but this one will send us then back into the final leg of our treasure hunt of sorts. This one's going to give us the message: when 90 remain, a sharpshooter takes aim. This one's pointing at the game Mortal 2. You want the number on the building, the first building that shows how many people are left. It should read 90, and at that point you want to play as a gunner. And then you open the terminal there, and it'll tell us polite clapping greets the red ball's arrival. This one's pointing us to pin golf, where we will pick red to be our character. And then once the ball goes in and you see the people in the background clapping, we open up the terminal again, and that takes us to take a seat at the sheriff's table. This one's taking us to Grimstone. You have to kind of have a game already started on this one, but you just have your main character sit in the sheriff's seat across from him in the desk in the first initial town. And this will give us the message: stand atop a gate where the worms congregate. This one's taking us to Block Koala. You just have to have I think the first level cleared in this one, but if you're standing on the initial place where the first gate used to be, open up the terminal there, and that's going to give us our next clue, which is what a pleasant day to park at the park. This one's for onion delivery. You just have to move your car into the park across from the starting area, open up the terminal there, and this will give us our final one, which is when attempting to steal, stand right next to a wheel. This one's pointing to rail heist, and on this one, you want to break the floor on the bottom of the train and stand on like the wheel axle. I mean, you'll see it in the footage here. It's kind of an odd one, but once you're standing on that, open up the terminal, and it's going to give us an odd code this time of 0229-1988. I'm guessing that this is a date of February 29th, 1988. I don't know what this specifically, there's probably some lore here on what this number is specifically referencing, but I'm not really sure what it is. We're now in our final segment of Miasma Tower. This is where kind of all of the stories come together. We find a little bit more about the bigwigs, the people in charge of UFO Soft. We also see a lot of different stuff with, I guess it's just a continuation of what we saw in the last chapter. Eventually we get to a hallway. It's an infinite hallway with some very odd like ghosts of the past that show up. There's a lot of different plot lines you could think about here. And there's some crazy theories out there of what people are seeing in this one. There's like a subplot that I've seen some people throwing around where an employee died, and there's like a spot in this demo where you can find like a bicycle hidden in a vent. The company is trying to hide this death that happened within the company. There's a lot of different theories out there of what's going on, but there's a lot of unexplained stuff that you see in the dialogue. Definitely Gregory Milk seems to have some different skeletons in his closet, I guess. There's a lot of things that he talks about and sees that maybe suggests that not everything is above the board with the company, that they're hiding stuff. And maybe that's why he hid this in the preservation of UFO 50, you know, to kind of say, hey, this is something else is going on here, and I want hidden in this game where the owners of this company aren't going to see it. We're going to release it to the world, and people are going to find it, and they're going to find out the truth about this company. Like, that's the kind of thing I think that makes this whole side thing really interesting to me. Once you have all the prototype discs, you have to have beaten all of those prototypes and have all the discs. There's a hallway at the end of this game that becomes... It's normally, I think it's called the Forever Hallway, and it's something that stretches on infinitely and lets you have all these discs. And at the end of that, there is a helicopter, and if you go into the helicopter, it gives you some credits, and that's kind of where Miasma Tower ends. Definitely, if you want to try this stuff out for yourself, at bare minimum, I mean, you're going to have to do everything to get to the credits scroll, but you definitely need to check out the third part of it, because that's where the meat of the info is, if you want to try to piece this stuff together on your own. I think this is maybe, for me, the most interesting part about UFO 50. The preservation stuff is super interesting to me, and I really like that they make this workplace not look like, you know, hey, everyone was always having a great time. I mean, this is kind of how every game studio works, it seems like. I've watched a lot of game studio documentaries and kind of seen the culture of, okay, like, we love working here, we love making great stuff, but there is another side to it where it's not always butterflies and rainbows, you know? There's definitely a different side to the industry. And I think this game does a really good job of showcasing both sides of it through these hidden mini games that are in there. It's super cool, and I think it really takes UFO 50 to the next level. And I think most people will never see this stuff. And that's fine. Like, I don't know if you guys are as interested in this kind of stuff as I am, but I really wanted to make a video showcasing this all because I want to make sure that more people know about like the stuff that exists in there, and I want everyone to experience it for themselves. That's why I'm not going through and kind of nitpicking every detail of, oh, and I think this happened and this happened. I think you should all experience it for yourself and make your own theories and kind of decide, hey, this is this is what I think happened with this company. Maybe it's all normal and the game is just made to be suspenseful, but that is Miasma Tower in the ARG. There are some other kind of hidden things in here too. There's other codes. There is a code that points to, it's called Lancelot, and it points towards the cat that was in the studio. Just a little Easter egg, when you type in Lancelot's name with a 0, I think this code is hidden in Night Manor towards the end of that game. It just meows at you. That's it. It just says meow on the screen. So cool, right? No, I love that they have little Easter eggs and codes and stuff that don't really matter. But yeah, that is Miasma Tower and the hidden story inside of UFO 50. That being said, while there are a ton of mysteries here that are solved, there are still some odd things about this game that have kind of went unsolved, and no one's really sure if they have more of a thing. There is one more developer name that you can put into the console. It's Sten-Murz, Sten-Murz. And this one takes us to it takes us to like a strange map. The interesting thing about this map is it's different for every save. This is a code that can't be just data mined. It's a different code for everyone, because this code changes every time you hit the random button on the menu. Once you generate a new random profile, if you use this map and kind of go top from bottom, left to right, if you put in the first letter of the little, we talked about it earlier, the terminals have like little 4-letter codes for each game, kind of code names that the devs used or whatnot. They're not always the first letters of the games, they're the first letters of the code themselves. But if you follow this map and put in all of those codes letter by letter, as you'll see me doing here in the video, it brings us to an odd room. This code brings us to like a room with a few capsules in it, and every time you talk to the capsules, they reference years in the future. So they reference like the year 2030. Definitely some kind of mystery that really no one's found anything to. This hasn't been solved yet. If there's anything to solve, I don't know. I don't even know if the game points you to this code somewhere, or if this is just something that people figured out by like just entering in people's names. This initial code was probably data mined at some point. I'm not really interested so much in the data mined code, which is funny because I'm gonna talk about data mined codes. But definitely this room is interesting because maybe it's talking about a future year. Maybe I think people have tried moving their system clocks and things like that. There's also been a discovery in Campanella 3. I haven't really played around with this, but apparently Campanella 3, if you plug in the second controller and do some stuff on that, brings up 50 more micro games that you can play in just like the on-screen display inside of Campanella. Which might be why in Miasma Tower, I'm pretty sure that there's a character that talks about the new build for Campanella 3. So maybe there's some hidden stuff there also. Maybe that's pointing towards something. I don't know. What I'm trying to say, though, is, Spelunky had codes or secrets and hidden things that were discovered way down the line. It wouldn't surprise me if UFO 50 is still hiding some secrets that people haven't figured out. If you're watching this video way down the line, Google around. There might be more to this game than even I know about at the time of recording this video, which is like a couple months after release of the game. If you want to figure out where in this game to look for different secret codes, try some different things. Look in the descriptions for things. There's even one hidden in the opening scroll. Who would have guessed? If you look at the footage, we slow it down, check that out. We got a code right there. There's codes hidden all over the place. A lot of them are tacked on to end credits, but just keep your eyes peeled. There are even some that are hidden inside of games. Just look for the dashes. I think that's my best hint. If you're trying to find codes yourself, look for the dashes. This is now the point in the video where I've tried out all the different codes that I found online that people have mined out of the game and whatnot, and I tried putting them all in. I know what most of them do just from experimenting on my own. There's a couple that I'm not really sure exactly what the codes do, but I just wanted to rapid fire through them all and just show you what they all do. I definitely want to say ahead of time here though, if you're trying to get achievements, if you're trying to cherry game, stuff like that, all of that saving also all disabled when you're using these codes. When you type in the code, like, you just get a version of the game that's temporary, which is funny because some of these codes are for some of the longer games. But to my knowledge, the second you leave that game, it's not saving anything, none of that. It's just a way to kind of play around with some different modes. Think of it like a game genie, We'll start off with a tactics. The code slow down turns it into a turn-based game. so you can kind of go through and get a little bit of a slower playthrough of tactics if it's too fast for you. It actually adds a different layer of strategy because you can only move so many times each turn. Avianos, there's the code Bluebeak, which is just a level select, simple enough. Black Koala has the code Worm1234, also simple, just unlocks all the levels for you, so you don't have to do it on your own. Bug Hunter has a bunch of codes. Ace's Shop kind of lets you, every time you buy a module in this mode, it keeps it in the shop, so you can buy infinite of the same module. There's also the code Ace's Rule, which does the exact same thing, but in 2-player mode. Good Jobs lets you enter a seed, so you can play like a specific seed for a game. Toon Race is a custom match setting for the 2-player mode inside of Bug Hunter. Work Hard gives you different starting moves. I think it randomizes it. I'm not actually 100% sure on that. And then the code Work Less, the opposite of Work Hard, is just a level select. Easy enough. If you want to try some of the late game levels that I would never be able to make through, try that out. Bushido Ball has one code. I don't know if this one says anything. Zato-ichi, ZATO-1CHI. A lot of these codes read into something. That one I can't figure out off the top of my head. Maybe it's a character, I'm not 100% sure. But this one makes the ball invisible. I don't know who wants to play this mode. It seems impossible. Camouflage, also just a level select code, Formelda. Formelda, which makes it so you can just play whatever level you want. Campanella gets one code, Bean Drip. This just lets you play the bonus stages inside of Campanella. Campanella 2, Mega Ball. This one just gives you all the upgrades, so you can have a really overpowered ship. I actually have never finished Campanella 2, so I saw a lot of things using this code that I didn't know existed. Campanella 3, Pacifist, no weapons mode. This seems like it'd be really hard, but if you want to try that out, there you go. Caramel. We've always talked about how to read this, I don't know. Test Lens, this just gives you a stage select. Simple enough. Combatants gets the code Ants, which also just unlocks all the levels. Cyber Owls gets Get Me Out, which just lets you play the escape levels inside of it. They also have Hawk Base, which lets you skip to, I believe it's the final segment of Cyber Owls. I'm not 100% sure on that because I haven't finished that game, but that seems to be what it is. And maybe the code Joe Servo would help me get there, because that one just gives you 100 lives. You can just die left and right, and you'll be fine. So if you want to see the whole game, easy way to do it there. Devolition also gets 4 codes. We've got Bomb Help, which starts you off with 25 pieces instead of 15. Evil Eyes, which adds colors where pieces blow up, so it makes the game a bit easier. You can kind of see where your explosions are. Full Rand, I believe this just gives you a bigger pool of randomized pieces. And then Weak Town makes you start with 0 villagers. I do not know how that works, to be honest. Divers gets 1 code, Free Eggs. That just gives you 3 eggs to start off with in your inventory. I'm going to be honest, I don't even know what an egg does in that game, and I've 100%ed it. But free eggs, 3 eggs. Perfect. Alphazar's Hat gives you the code Sideshow, which lets you play the isometric bonus stage in that game. Fist Howl has a handful of codes. Good Girl gives you a dog that has seemingly infinite HP. I don't know if it ever dies, but it seemed to last with me as long as I tried out that code. Hell Fist gives all the characters max stats, and then Team Fist does the same thing but in the 2-player mode. Golf Area has a code of Forever. Nice little pun there for golf, but that one just has no strokes count, so you can just infinitely swing the club, which is probably what that game needs because it's very difficult. Grimstone has the code Wolfpack. This one's crazy. It just gives you a full set of dogs in your party, which means that the game autoplays itself because you don't control the dogs in Grimstone. I don't know if you could finish the game as the Wolfpack, but it would be very interesting to try. That'd be a fun little challenge for someone. Hotfoot has a bunch of codes. These are a little bit complicated. There's dual bags and test bags. Those give you custom game settings. Test bags is for 1-player mode, and then dual bags is for 2-player mode, I believe. And then Go Gator with an exclamation point lets you play as Monkey and Robot, who they have names. I forgot what their names are. It probably says on the screen at some point here, but those are like the hidden characters in that game that you normally can't play as. Left Foot is also a code. This is one of the ones I could not figure out what it did. I played it for a while. I couldn't figure out what Left Foot does. Maybe someone in the comments will say this is what Left Foot does, but I couldn't figure it out. And then Play Fair also lets you play as whatever character you want. So you can play as that monkey and robot, and this is the one where it'll say on the screen what the characters' names are, but I'm not looking at the video right now, so I can't remember. So, whoops, that's my bad. Hyper Contender, this one is actually kind of a fun code. This one, it takes out the rings from the game. The code is past rule, but it makes it so there's no rings in the game, and then the characters have HP, which I think is actually a really fun mode, and they should have included it in the main game. Speaking of that, Kick Club has the code Football, which gives you a two-player versus mode that kind of works like Pong, where you're trying to kick the ball into the other player's goal, essentially. I guess it works like soccer. Duh, it's called Kick Club. But that's actually also an interesting mode that I'm surprised they didn't just put in there. But it's a fun little thing to play with if you're playing two-player. Lords of Disconia has a pair of codes. There's Bank Shot, which just makes the indicator range a little bit easier to read. It's a little bit longer. And then there's Bump More, which just makes your disc bounce off of other things much faster, so it's a little bit more hectic of a game mode. From there we go to Magic Garden, which has the code Overgrow. This one has no potions in it, which means the enemy slimes will just infinitely spawn. Seems very difficult, but kind of a fun variety on that game. Mini Max has one code, which is Tiny Buff, that just gives you everything. All the items, all the power-ups, all that stuff. Mortal has a bunch of codes. Ben's mode lets you play the game with 150 lives, but you can never gain lives, which is a crazy way to play that game. You have Fire Arrow, which every time you do the arrow sacrifice move, the move that like launches you into the wall, you just start on fire. Give Life just doubles your initial lives. You go from 20 lives up to 40. Leaf Head, anytime that you die, you spawn vines that you can climb up, and what that means is every time you die to an enemy or to spikes or something, if you sacrifice yourself, it doesn't work. Open Tomb just unlocks all the levels and gives you 20 lives on all of them. Mortal 2 we move on to. That has the code Benedict, which only lets you play as the warrior, the scout, the bomber, just those three characters. The craziest code in this whole thing, Night Manor, has the code Open Cage, and this turns the killer into something straight out of a Goosebumps book. It is a giant hamster. Who would have called it? I actually thought this would be kind of cute and fun when I read the description. I got jump scared, I think, the first time it showed up. I didn't think it was going to be brandishing a knife and trying to murder me, but that's how Night Manor works. Ninpeck, Hard Loop. This one increases the difficulty level. Simple enough. I think that's the way the game plays when you're in your second loop of that game. I've actually never cleared the first loop because I'm a bad gamer. But all the characters are harder, there's more of them. The enemies, some of them double shoot. Seems hard. Onion Delivery has a pair of codes. Road Rage makes it so you take 0 damage. This is kind of a fun little mode where you can run into whatever, which is good because that game's very hard. The code Goof Zoom, I think from what I was reading online, I believe this code makes certain events happen more often. I don't know which events those are though, because I'm also really bad at Onion Delivery, and I tried a couple times and I didn't even make it past the first stage, so I'm sorry. There's a code, I'm not 100% sure what it does, but I'm pretty sure it makes some of the harder random events happen after day 1. I'm pretty sure. From here we go to Overbold. We have a pair of codes here. We have Cash Bump, which just, I think, starts you at $600 initially instead of, I believe it's like $200 regularly. It's just a higher prize payout off the bat. And then Fogon, which is the 2-player chicken mode, but here when you raise the level, sometimes it adds threats, which is what the normal 2-player mode does. Other times, though, if you raise the threat, it'll actually take away some of the starting gear. So it actually makes it harder. It's an interesting move on chicken. I don't think that 2-player mode is very much fun to begin with, but it is interesting to see that there is an alternative to it. Paint Chase, this one, the code Even Coat, lets you do a level select, but it lets you play whatever level. You want to jump to the last level, go right away. Great though if you want to practice levels, if you're trying to get that cherry. There's another code, Go, 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 which I will show on screen because that is a confusing one to read, but it's much easier to look at. That one is no timer enemies on levels, so if you just want to paint levels and have no opposition, like I don't think you can lose in this mode, so just have fun painting the levels in. Good job, you did it. Party House has a bunch of codes, and it seems like a lot of these do the exact same thing. VIPs only is a code that is normally given to you through like the end credits. But this one, it just lets you put in a seed, so you can type in wherever. I believe the code also The +1s code also does the exact same thing. I couldn't find a difference between the two. And then also another pair of codes, Make Glee and RSVP Soon. Both of these let you make your own custom shop. So it works the same way as the seed, except you make your seed, essentially. But again, two different codes that feel like they do the same thing. So unless I'm missing something, I believe those are just doing the same thing. Pilot Quest, if you type in the code more meat, this just starts a new game where you start with 10 meat. Simple enough. Pin Golf has the code Starball, which this one's also given to you at the end credits when you clear Pin Golf. This one just lets you play as Pilot and Waldorf, two characters from other UFO 50 games. Kind of a fun way to do it, but fun little thing that you can try out if you want. Planet Zoldath has two codes. You have Less Harm, which has you take half damage, and then you have Trotters, which just lets, again, another code where you put in a seed. You can play the same seed as someone else if you want. 4D has two codes. One of them, Calm Seas. This one, whenever you get toward a boss, the boss will just ignore you. So you can just sit there chilling with him, whatever you want to do. And then you have Chandar, which gives you all the items and upgrades in the game if you want to just get 100% progress, and play around with, see some of the different upgrades that game has. Quibble Race has a crazy code called Blacklight, which just lets you watch races. If you're into Salty Bet, maybe you want to do this. I don't know. They also have the code Tough Race, which is where special events always occur. From what I saw the Meteor one, and I saw the Garbage one. I believe there's also a Pollution event. Those are like the three events that show up at random on every race. And then you have Wild Bets, which takes away the betting cap. This one's kind of funny because the CPUs will just get loans and bet crazy amounts of money. So if you want to really get your econ up, I guess Wild Bets is kind of a fun way to do that. Real Heist has a pair of codes. We have Good Spur. This one, you start every stage with all the power-ups. You have a super overpowered character, and I would find it hard to die, I think, with how much you get, how much you get with this code activated. And then there's also the code Lazy Cops, which my short understanding with this one that I played around with, I think the time for the lawmen's turns, I believe, is just kind of shortened up. So they take less time to, they have less time, I should say, because they're lazy. They have less time to counter you. Rakshasha has one code called Soul Loop. This one just makes it so every time you die, you just have to pick up one of those little power-ups to respawn. Simple enough. Rock On Island has Club Pass. This is another unlock code if you want to try some of the later levels in that game. Seaside Drive has two codes. These are kind of odd ones. You have Need Pies, which that one, every time you die, you don't lose a life. You still die, but you don't lose a life. It always stays the same. And then this one's real confusing to me. They also have the code Weak Shot. This one, you can't charge up your vehicle, so you have really weak shots that you do. But I also noticed that it seems like your opponents also have weak shots because you can't die that way. The only way you can die in this mode is if you run into something, which is kind of odd. The Big Bell Race, this one has Kiwi Aura, which this one just makes power-ups appear more often. I think it's like twice the spawn rate. They spawn so fast that you can pick up two and you just don't get, you can't pick up the second power while you have something else activated, which is something I didn't know that game even supported. Danger has grav guns. This one just unlocks all the upgrades right off the bat. Valbrace has a couple different codes. These change the game quite a bit. One is Archmage, but the A's are 4s. This one gives you no strength off the bat, so if you just want to do spells and stuff, this is a great way to go. Seems like a miserable way to play that game, if I'm being honest. And then you also have the code Bug Body, which literally just turns you into an insect. It kind of reminded me of the mascot, the sergeant in Combats that's pointing at stuff in that game. I don't know if that's supposed to be a reference to it or not, or if it's just, you're just playing this as an insect. Belgress gets one code. That one's Alpha Best. This one just gives you all the upgrades off the bat. Waldorf's Journey has the code Blub Blub. This one has you start with 30 shells. Warp Tank gets the code Slim Tank, which lets you play as a slime. The interesting thing about this one, there's no world map. You just go from level to level, which is a weird way to play that game. I think the game really gets tied together by that level select screen. Wasper, this is our last code. This one is True Blue, which just gives you infinite lives, which is a great way if you want to experience the Star Waspier game. That's a great way to do it, because it just lets you live forever. Because that game's hard, and I don't think I ever would have seen the whole thing without this code. That is all the codes that I found. This list I got off of like a Steam community guide, and then I kind of just tested them all out myself, because a lot of them just had like question marks by like what they did. So I tried to figure out as many as I could, and I figured out a couple, but there's still a few that are kind of mysterious. So if you know what any of those codes do, if I mentioned I don't really know what it does, and you know what it does, drop it in the comments. I'd be curious to know if I'm missing anything big. But to my knowledge, that is where we're at right now with codes. And that's it, folks. That is my journey through UFO 50. This is my final planned video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like. I actually worked pretty hard on this one. And if you enjoyed it also, like, let me know in the comments. This is a little bit different of a style than I usually do. So I'm kind of learning on the job, you know? I'm trying to figure out what my channel looks like in terms of content. If you have any suggestions, or I didn't cover something for UFO 50 that you want to see a video on, maybe we can do more, but right now I don't plan on doing any more. There is going to be a link to the playlist in the top right corner of the screen. You can click on it. That'll show you all the different videos that I've done. I've been playing through all of UFO 50 from the beginning, trying out every game. A huge history of videos. I've done a lot of content for this game at this point. And if you made it through this video, congratulations. This was a very long video. As I kept recording more and more, I went, wow, this is going to be a long one. So, longest video I've done, I'm sure, on this game. But thank you so much for watching this whole journey with me. I do appreciate it. And I will see you for the next video, whatever it is. I don't know what, but we'll see you in the future with something else. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for watching.